If you negotiate internationally, you've probably experienced moments where the other side's behaviour felt difficult, too slow, too direct, too formal, too vague, or perhaps surprisingly informal. And often the issue is not intelligence, it's not competence, and it's not even the numbers. It's culture. Not culture in the sense of food, music, or national stereotypes, but the deeper patterns that shape how people think, communicate, build trust, make decisions, and negotiate. Every time we enter a negotiation in another country, we're also entering a different logic, a different understanding of hierarchy, risk, relationships, time, success, and professionalism. One of the most influential attempts to understand these differences came from the work of Geert Hofstede. Hofstede was a Dutch social psychologist and researcher who worked with IBM during the 1960s and 70s. At the time, IBM operated in many countries around the world. Employees from different national subsidiaries regularly completed internal surveys about work, management, values, and behaviour. Hofstede realised this created a rare opportunity. He could compare how people from different societies respond to many of the same questions while working inside the same global organisation. And as he analysed the results, certain cultural patterns began to appear. Over time, this developed into his famous cultural dimensions framework. The model eventually describes 6 key dimensions through which cultures often differ. These are power distance, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, achievement versus quality of life, long-term versus short-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. The framework became extremely influential. Companies, universities, governments, and trainers around the world began using it to better understand international cooperation and negotiation. But Hofstede's work has also been criticised. Some researchers argue that cultures are too complex to reduce to national scores. Others point out that societies change over time. And of course, not every individual fits the average pattern of their country. That criticism is important because Hofstede should never be treated as a rigid formula. It's not a checklist, and it's not a stereotype machine. It's a framework, a lens, a starting point for understanding patterns that often appear across societies. Real people are also or always more complex. Personality matters, generation matters, profession matters. Organisational culture matters. Education, life experience, and personal history matter too. Someone from Berlin may negotiate very differently from someone in rural Bavaria. A global startup may behave differently from a traditional family business in the same country. And personality models, relationship history, or industry culture add additional layers again. So cultural intelligence is never about putting people into boxes. It's about recognising tendencies, asking better questions, and becoming more aware of different expectations. Because once we understand what sits behind behaviour, we stop taking everything personally, and we start negotiating more effectively. In this series, we'll explore each of Hofstede's dimensions, not as abstract theories, but as practical insight for international negotiation. We'll look at how these dimensions influence decision-making, communication, trust building, planning, conflict, relationships, and negotiation strategy itself. Not to create stereotypes, but to create awareness. Because culture doesn't determine behaviour completely, but it often influences what people experience as normal, professional, respectful, risky, or trustworthy. And once you begin to see those patterns, international negotiation starts to make much more sense.